In this video, I'm going to be sharing my framework for how to onboard a new virtual assistant client confidently and effectively. I remember when I started out as a virtual assistant back in 2015, and whenever I landed a new client, I'd hop on an onboarding call with them. What I realized was that a lot of the clients were hiring a VA for the first time and had no idea how to run an onboarding meeting themselves, or they had VAs before me and they still had no idea how to run an onboarding meeting themselves. The experience that created for me was starting off in a new position, feeling disorganized, not knowing where things were, not understanding how the business worked. And because a lot of businesses hire a VA when they're in a growth period, it was kind of like I got fire hosed with a whole bunch of tasks and responsibilities without any organization or forethought at all. So I was starting behind the 8 ball. And because the businesses were growing quickly and were so busy, it felt like I was always struggling to catch up. So in this video, we're going to talk about why you are the best person to lead the onboarding meeting and not the client, the essential phases of running the actual onboarding meeting, and some pro tips on how to make it more effective so that you can set yourself and your client up for success. Let's kick off our chat with what an onboarding meeting actually is. Some people might refer to an onboarding meeting as a kickoff call, or if you've worked in corporate and 9-to-5 jobs, it's referred to typically as an orientation meeting. And if you're getting hired inside of a corporation or in a well-established business, chances are they do have a process for their onboarding meeting. But like is the case with a lot of online businesses, a lot of these businesses are experiencing a period of growth, which is why they're hiring a virtual assistant to support them through that growth. And a lot of times they don't have any processes or systems set up in their business at all yet. So when you come to an onboarding meeting prepared, you know that you're going to get the things that you need to get started on the right foot. The client's decision to hire you is going to be affirmed and build a deeper level of trust because you're taking the lead. And it's also going to position you as a leader among the team because you're showing up prepared and leading the meeting. This may not seem like a big deal now, but if you haven't gone through the process of an effective onboard, sometimes you don't realize exactly how important and impactful it is until you do. And imagine the value that you can bring to your client's team when you show up as a leader. It's going to help you retain that client, leave an amazing impression, and make things way easier for you when you get started. When I first started my virtual assistant business, what feels like way back in 2015 at this point. Online industry years are kind of like dog years. So when you've actually been working in the online industry for 5 or 10 years, things have changed and grown so fast that sometimes it feels like decades. But anyway, when I first started out, there were really only a few virtual assistant Facebook groups that existed, and they only had a couple thousand people in them, if that. And truthfully, when I would apply to a virtual assistant position, I would almost always receive a response back, if not get hired immediately just through a simple conversation in the DMs. Fast forward to today, and the VA space, the whole online industry, looks a lot different. VA communities have grown to tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of members, many of whom are just starting out and clamoring to get their first or their first few clients. Getting a response to submitting a VA application is not guaranteed, and standing out is a lot more challenging. So when you actually secure a client, like any other business, you want to do your best to keep that client. And you showing up prepared to lead an effective onboarding meeting confidently is the very first step. Plus, many clients are hiring because they're already feeling overwhelmed. Either their business is growing fast, they're already managing multiple team members, and typically they're more of a visionary, so processes and systems aren't really their thing. So when you come in prepared, it leaves the best impression and makes them feel like they've made the right decision in hiring you. What better way to start off your relationship with a client? Okay, now that you know why you should be the one leading the onboarding meeting, let's dive into the phases of an effective meeting. Number 1, the pre-work. Any effective meeting requires some preliminary effort, and an onboarding meeting with your new virtual assistant client is no different. At a minimum, you should be preparing your agenda, customizing it to your new client, and sharing it along ahead of the meeting so that the other team members can also be prepared. If you're starting out, you may have no idea how to prepare to lead an onboarding meeting with a client that has an online business, or you may have one and you're not quite sure if it's the best it could be, then you can grab my completely free onboarding meeting agenda in the description below this video. This agenda has been honed over years and years of being on onboarding meetings that I let clients run before I knew what I was doing. And now, after being on dozens and dozens of onboarding meetings that I've effectively led. And one pro tip I'll share is once you create that meeting agenda, make a template out of it and let your client know that you've done that. You can save it in their internal files, and they'll know now they have an awesome onboarding agenda template for future hires. And they're going to appreciate that extra little forethought that you put into doing that for them. Once you've done your prep, it's time for the actual live call. Once the meeting kicks off, you'll lead with the introduction. Now, if you're working for a solopreneur, it may just be you and the client on the call, in which case you can just say hi and get reacquainted. But if you're working with someone who has a team, there may be other team members on as well. So you'll want to give everyone the opportunity to share a little bit about themselves and how they support the client before moving on to the rest of the meeting. Then pull up your agenda on screen share and give a quick review of how the call is going to flow. I found this to be really helpful because a lot of times clients are thinking ahead to things that you've already mapped out on the agenda. And so showing it ahead of time and what the flow is going to look like gives them a sense of assurance that they know you're going to get to whatever it is that they want to go over to. The next part of the onboarding meeting is the business overview. And I cannot state this enough how important this part of the meeting is. Now, if you've done a discovery call with this client or you went through an interview process, they may have shared a little bit about what they do and how they work. But over the business overview, you want to get crystal clear on the client's business model. Their business model is essentially who they help, what they sell to help them, and how much they charge to help them. This may seem like really high-level information for a VA that's going to be going in and performing detailed tasks every day. But trust me, when you have a solid understanding of your client's business model, it's going to help you connect the dots and put all of the pieces of the puzzle together on the tasks that you're helping your client complete. Don't forget to use an AI note taker during the meeting, record it, or if you like to take handwritten notes like me, have your pen and paper ready so that you can take notes. After you've gone through the business overview, next is the team overview. Again, if a solopreneur has just hired you, it may be just you and them, and in that case, there's really not that much to talk about here. But if you're being hired on a team that has multiple team members, you're going to want to know who it is you're working with. So even if those people aren't on this call, you're going to want to know who's a part of the team, what they do, and how you're going to be interacting with them as part of your role. This is also the perfect time to ask who's going to be actually training you. And spoiler alert, if you're the first person that this client is hiring, unless they're a systematic person, they probably have no training process in place. And that's why the next few steps that I'm going to share are really important, so stick around. The next thing you're going to discuss is the role overview. So this is where you and the client go back to what you originally discussed and likely is in your contract about what services you're actually providing to the client. So if you're being hired as an administrative VA, this may be things like email management, calendar management, client delivery, or some other daily operational tasks. If you're a technical VA, you might be looking at tasks like funnel building, email marketing, or building automations. And if you're a creative VA, you may be discussing things like content and copywriting, graphic design, or content repurposing for different platforms like social media or blogs or podcasts. So once you get clear on the overall role, next up is the project overview. This is where you and the client are going to discuss any current projects or upcoming projects that you're going to be involved in. So if you're being hired as an administrative VA, you may simply be running the daily operational tasks of the business, and there may not be any specific projects that have a start and an end date that you're going to be participating in. But if you're being hired as a technical or a creative VA, you may be involved in something like the launch of a program or a course, or the launch of a podcast or a blog, or a live or virtual event that the client is hosting. So this is your chance to get clear on those projects, get a general understanding of the timelines, and how it is that you're going to be supporting the client with those projects. Now, before we wrap the meeting up, there's a really great framework that you can employ here to help both the client and you set expectations and get clear on how things are going to roll from here on out. This is the 30, 60, 90-day framework. And this is a really common framework in hiring. You can find templates for it on hiring sites like Indeed, or even my favorite project management tool, Asana, has a template for it. But basically, this framework is where you and the client are going to agree upon what tasks you're going to take on during the first 30 days of your work together, the next 30 days, which is your 60 day, and the next 30 days, which is your 90 days. Again, this is not something to skip over because a lot of clients who are hiring a virtual assistant are hiring either because they're in a rapid growth period and they need support delegating tasks that are overwhelming them, or they're hiring to replace a previous VA. And you don't have the benefit of all of that experience that that client has had working in their own business, or the benefit of the experience that their previous VA had. And so for you to come into a business and being expected to or trying to take on everything that that person wants to delegate without having the experience of that particular person's business can wind up overwhelming you. And honestly, this is why there's often a lot of churn in businesses, is because people aren't onboarded correctly and don't have a chance to learn and build on the foundations of the business before having everything thrown onto their plate. So this 30, 60, 90 day framework is going to set both you and the client up for success because you're going to have a really clear scope of work that is realistic for you to take on and learn so that you can show up as your best. And this again goes back to retaining your clients. When you show up and deliver quality work, that's going to build trust with the client and build a positive working relationship so that you guys can work together for a long time without them having to go through the intensive and expensive process of rehiring and without you having to go out and replace them as a client. Finally, we've reached the wrap up. So this is where you set a schedule for the next set of meetings and agree upon the action items for each person on the meeting after the meeting ends. Now, after the meeting, you still have an opportunity to wow your client by having a strong follow through on whatever action items you agreed upon during the meeting. So make sure you have a process for documenting post-meeting action items and follow through on them promptly. All right, now you know why you leading the onboarding meeting with your new virtual assistant client is going to set both you and your client up for success, and you have an exact framework to lead it effectively and confidently. If you want to feel even more confident, you can snag my free client meeting template in the description below this video. It's on a completely editable Google document template and goes into even more detail than even what we discussed in this video. Again, you'll find that link right in the description below this video. See you next time.